Good morning. It's pretty early on a Saturday morning, and I choose not to show my face. But here's what we're going to be doing. A few different versions of the starter. There's the starter you met last week. And here's the starter that has been left out overnight.
Overnight starter.
Here's Mr. Mastriani's special book. Oh, don't read it. His secret book where he keeps all of his different recipes that he creates and he works on. It's been like 5 years. It started in Italy, so that was, gosh, 13 years ago. That one is.
Pizzeria in Italy.
But this book that he's been keeping of his bread and different recipes and like as he's perfecting it is at least 5 years old, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here he is, Mr. Master. Okay, so we're gonna do bread this morning. He's, like I said, he's the one in my house is the expert around this. So we're gonna talk through your sourdough loaf that you're gonna make. I'm gonna drink my coffee and we'll sit back and enjoy it. Okay, all right, we are getting ready to go here. Mr. Scott Mastriani, take it away.
Is it on?
It's on.
Oh. All right, good morning. Welcome to our bread channel here on a Saturday morning. For those of you that are new to the channel, make sure you like and subscribe down below. We're gonna get you lots of great recipes, but here we go. So I think you all have your own starter, or you've been making your starter. I think Mrs. Mastro has mentioned this one's, I think, about 4 years old. So what we did last night was we took some out to put it into our mixing bowl here, and we gave it some fresh flour and water and let it sit out overnight. And you can tell it's eating because you see the little bubbles, and on the side it grows. So this one will go back in the fridge in a little bit. And then last night, in addition to some of our discard, I added a little bit of flour and a little bit of water. It doesn't really matter how much you put in of each. Usually whatever I take out is what I put in here.
So let me ask a question. So this is basically like you're just setting up a new starter.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
So you pulled out, say, a cup in, and you put a cup of your starter into this.
Yes.
And then you added...
I added a half a cup of flour and a half a cup of water to my discard to create a new starter. Like a little baby starter.
Baby starter. This is, we learned, this is called the mother bread.
The mother.
This is called the mother bread. And now this is the baby bread. Okay.
Little baby bread.
Well, this is where you could give it to a friend or you could do something like that. Okay.
Exactly. So I never want to waste the discard because you could always make something out of it. And there's lots of recipes if you subscribe to our channel.
And we will be because we're going to be learning maybe pretzels, bagels. Pancakes. Yeah, that's next week. Just prepare yourself.
So that was last night, and in Italy they call it either a poulish or a biga. So a lot of the pizzerias will make a poulish or biga the night before. The poulish being just 100%. So if you use 1 cup of flour, it's 1 cup of water. If you use a half a cup of flour, you would use that's right. Half a cup of water. Oh, you guys are so great. And then a biga is a 50% ratio. So if you use 1 cup of flour, you would use a half a cup of water.
He was a math teacher. That's how come he can do that math so fast.
So that's how you get a poulish or biga. And I let that sit out overnight because it starts eating. You see the little bubbles and it grows and it starts getting ready to act as a levain.
And when you started it last night, about how low was it? Has this doubled or tripled?
It's probably about doubled, maybe a little less than doubled.
So sitting it out overnight had it double.
Correct.
Okay. And that looks equally. This one looks more bubbly than your starter.
And this one, yeah. Looks lovely.
It does.
It's
look
hungry.
lovely.
Think about a brand new baby. They eat all the time.
Exactly. That baby biga was hungry.
And then this morning I got up and just got this ready to go. This is just the flour and water mixture. It's between 3 and 4 cups of flour and about 1.5 cup of water. I do everything on a scale. So if you're gonna get into baking or get into bread, The digital scales are the scales for weight. That's how a lot of bakers and bread makers, we do it. And so it's a really neat feature.
I know that Miss Hernandez, Chef Hernandez, she does all of her baking in weight also. And it's a more precise way. So if you are interested in baking, there's another investment.
Because if you get into bread making, generally everything is done in percentages of hydration. Percentages of hydration. What does that mean? Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Thanks, Tammy, for asking that question in the chat box.
I don't have a Tammy in my class, but maybe Ventura High School does.
Thanks, Fish. Gordon
No,
Fish.
Gannon. No,
Gannon
he's in
Fish.
a different class.
There was a few of them. Anyway, what were we saying?
Hydration. Percentage of hydration.
So the different breads are often just different hydration percentages, like your Polish and your Biga, the Polish being 100%, your Biga being 50%. Breads can be anywhere. Pizza dough is usually somewhere between 60 to 70% hydration, meaning whatever amount of flour you have, if you had 100 grams of flour, you could have 60 grams of water. So that's why the percentages and weights work well. Usually the sourdough breads are upwards in the 70 to 75%, 67 to 75%. So if I had 100 grams of water, I might have around 100 grams of flour, I'd have about 70 grams of water.
So your quick breads are going to be less hydrated. That's why they're more dense.
Correct.
And the more highly hydrated breads that you have are going to be the ones that are softer and chewier and lighter.
And they get because what happens to a lot of that water is as it cooks, it evaporates from, you learned that from Mr. Smith's science class, so very good, right?
Or if you're at Ventura, you learned it from...
If you're at Ventura.
Not Mr. McIntyre.
Not Mr. McIntyre.
Maybe.
Mr. Donnan, who is
No, that's a Ventura. Anyway,
moving on. You can edit that out. So this morning I just mixed the flour and water ahead of time. And with the flour, you can use an all-purpose flour, bread flour. You can do a mixture of white flour and wheat flour, bread flour and wheat flour.
We're just using all-purpose flour for now.
So all-purpose flour. And the only reason I did that is because then that flour and water starts interacting. I let that sit out for about an hour. And they start mixing. And you can see what that does is just that flour and water starts looking like some of this agent. So now to this, what I'll do is I'll add my mixture, my levain, my starter, acts as yeast, as my riser. And then I'll add the salt. And then we'll mix and be ready to go.
All right, go ahead and do it.
Like on camera.
Okay, I don't know if you guys can see this, but there's like a little like gnat or fly there. And that's actually a really good sign. If you get a little fly or a gnat that circles around your starter, because it means that there's a higher sugar content that is being created and they're drawn to it. All right, so we're getting ready to mix the biga right here. Polish, sorry, that's 100%.
100%, right.
100% Polish with just the flour and water, because really that's all bread is.
And I think for this, we were at about 75% hydration. Flour to water. So this morning I mixed a little flour and water, and this was just the all-purpose flour. I didn't add anything else to it. One of the things you have to resist, as if you can mix by hand or you can mix in your mixer, the process of, it's called autolysis. Autolysis is the first part, as prior to the flour and water mixing together and starting to activate. Right before we get into the fermentation, which is what's thought of as the rising, where the flavors come together. I'm going to keep a little bowl of water because this one I'm going to mix by hand. I like to mix by hand because you get to start feeling when the dough comes together.
And what is it we're making today?
Today we're making just like a boule, a little sourdough loaf boule. And a boule is like a round loaf that I don't have a picture of a boule right here,
Well.
but you're going to see it at the end. Some of the other types you've seen, the French loaves or the long ones are called baguettes. There's what's called a batard. I don't know my French too well, but it's a smaller, like a rectangular loaf. But today we're going to make a nice round boule.
Okay.
Ready? Ready to start mixing?
Just start mixing.
Okay, so we're gonna mix by hand. If you don't use your mixer, what you have to do, also, and I think you talked about it last week on your other episode, was if you keep some wet hands, the dough has a harder time sticking. The sourdough loaves, and as we're mixing by hand, it's a very wet dough and it gets sticky. So by doing it by hand, I tend to get a good feel of if the dough needs anything else, if it needs more flour or water, but you really want to try to resist the urge to add more flour just because it feels wet. So here we go with the starter. This is really cool because it's alive. You see the structure? You can see the strands are like gluten. It's all holding together.
And it is alive. It's a live bacteria.
Little culture. So the structure's good. I'm going to use my hands for this one because I forgot to get my spatula.
Okay, again, if I had you on smell vision, you would be able to smell, and it's pretty pungent. Well, to me, it smells like yeast. I don't think that many of you have worked with yeast enough to know what it smells like, but it smells like bread. And so it's okay to have that smell. You're doing it right. Okay, so that is a 0.
So I zeroed it out. If you work with the scale, you see if you have nothing on there, it comes out 0. But if you start with something on there, that zeroes it out. So now I know it doesn't matter how much I have in there. I can add whatever I'm gonna add. So I'm adding my salt.
Just kosher salt.
Kosher salt. What's the number?
1.3.
13?
Yeah.
Sure. Sounds good. You can do 9, 12. The salt interacts, gives it some flavor. So I don't always get it exact because, again, I go by feel. But then I just start incorporating it all together, and it's always pretty amazing. This is just flour, water, and salt. We made our own yeast. So now we're going to mix it. We're just going to incorporate it. It's going to get a little structure.
And you think about all of the different cultures around the world that use just the combination of flour and water and salt to create whatever they use in their bread. Tortillas, and it's just it's a different flour. It's a corn flour or naan, and that's just flour and water. It's just different concentrations and hydration of flour and water. So it's very interesting. If you think about Asian cultures, they use a rice flour with their water to create the wrappers for many of their things like wontons and egg rolls and spring rolls. So, every culture has this.
So we're just keep incorporating until we get, making a mess.
So it is pretty sticky. You can see, pull your hands up, just stop for a second, and you can see how it is sticky, and that's okay, because as we talked about, this is a really hydrated dough. It's got a lot of water in it.
And what it's doing, it's creating structure. I believe that's the gluten that goes inside. So as your bread, when you watch this dough, we're gonna mix, and we can even let it sit like this if we want, because eventually we're gonna make the structure. We're gonna make that round. Basically, the crust just acts like a case for all of the bread inside, the gases that make those big open crumbs. The crumb is referred to as the inside of the bread. So if you buy a loaf of bread at the store, like a loaf of Nature's Own or Wonder Bread, there's not much of a crumb.
Wonder Bread.
They don't even know what Wonder Bread is.
Well, who eats Wonder Bread? I mean, maybe you guys. Sorry if you eat Wonder Bread.
I taste it. I like to taste my dough sometimes. Get a little of what that flavor is like. But then
Can you tell if you need to add more salt to it and that sort of thing?
When I taste
But
it,
you
yeah.
don't then put that hand back in.
No, I didn't.
Okay. All right, so after you have this mixed, then what? You're gonna let it rest?
I'm gonna keep mixing this. I don't think I need to add in anything to it. I just need to work it and just keep kind of folding it over itself. So we call these stretch and folds because that's what starts making the structure. And then I'm gonna let it rest. Once I have the structure, I'm gonna let it rest for probably about 1 to 2 hours this morning.
Okay, so we're gonna do this for a few minutes.
Correct.
And you wanna just get all that dry flour incorporated and wet.
Yeah.
And then keep it in the bowl.
Yeah.
And let it rest for
this morning, it's gonna be a couple hours.
Because it's pretty warm out today.
It's warm out, and so that's the other thing. Temperature plays a big role. So I've done a lot of these recipes, and a lot of times it comes out different. Humidity, temperature, all play a role. The temperature of your kitchen, temperature of your water. You know, a lot of the scientists and experts will tell you to measure the temperature of your water, take the temperature of your dough. You can take your temperature of your dough throughout, so then you get a sense of, you know, when it's ready for the next stage, and that's what the pros do. But we got YouTube. All right. So this is, you can see how it's come together, and again, just flour, water, our starter, and our salt, and it's starting to come together.
Can you go more slowly?
Yeah, sorry. So this technique is just a stretch and fold. So I'll reach under, stretch, and fold it over the top of itself. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna let this dough sit now for a little bit of time, and we're gonna come back and do some stretches and folds about every 45 minutes. So you're gonna set a timer for about 45 minutes. You're gonna come back and we're gonna do stretch and folds. We're probably gonna do that 3 times.
So look and see, you can see how wet this dough is, and even you can see how sticky it is. And that's okay. You know, again, this isn't a pie crust, this isn't a cookie dough. It's bread, and it's supposed to be hydrated and wet. So practice that stretch and fold technique, and then set your timer for 45 minutes. You can leave your bread or your dough in the same bowl you mixed it in. And then after 45 minutes, come back and give it a few stretches and folds. And how many times are you gonna do that?
We're gonna do 3 stretch and folds. So we'll come back every 45 minutes and 3 times.
Okay, so just put a towel over your dough, just so no bugs get in it. And to, why?
That's what Ken did on his YouTube channel.
Because when you took the class, that's what they did.
No, I think what we do it just to cover it and let it rest. No, you do that primarily so it doesn't get this hard, crusty skin on top of the dough that develops, and so it'll keep the dough moist. Again, you know, can you use a mixer? Yes, I like using my hands because as you start doing it, you want to get a feel for, does it need more? But you do have to resist the urge to put more flour in to get it to dry up like a typical dough ball.
And in Alton Brown's, when you watched that video about bread, he talked about why you cover it, and he puts water, he puts it in the oven and puts water in there because you don't want to get that hard crust on the outside while it's trying to rise, because it'll prevent it from rising. So you want to keep it pretty moist on the outside.
The warmer it is, the quicker it rises. So that's why some people use an oven. I've seen sometimes people turn the oven on and then off and then let it sit in there. If you're, you know, our climate here is generally conducive to just sitting out on the counter, maybe covered. But that's where you start to watch when you know it's ready to get to the next stage.
Okay, so we'll see you in 45 minutes.
Alexa, set a timer for 45 minutes.
Second timer, 45 minutes, starting now.
Thank you.
To name this timer.
So we're ready for our first stretch and fold. About 45 minutes have gone by. And this isn't so much about the rising of the dough. where it has to double in size, because what we're gonna do is that same process where as we take it from the side, we stretch and fold it over itself. And again, having our
Can you
hands.
go a little more slowly so we can really see that stretch and pull? So you pull from the bottom and then you just fold it over the top.
Over itself.
It's kind of fun.
So you see it start coming together.
Yeah, it's not as loose, I guess, as it was before.
Nope. So we're just gonna, we don't have to overdo it. We're just gonna get that. We'll let it sit for another 45, then we'll come back, do it again, and then we'll get ready for our final shape.
Okay, Alexa, set a timer for 45 minutes.
All right, we're back for our next stretch and fold. You can see it's starting to firm up a bit. It's getting a couple gas bubbles, which aren't bad, because that means the gas is starting to expand inside. When it cooks, that's what makes all of those open holes inside the bread when you cut into it.
Yeah, if you've ever cut into a piece of bread and there's like a big hole in the middle, it's from the gas bubbles that were created during its rise and fermentation. All right, we're doing the stretch and pull.
This will probably be, this might be the last one. We're gonna get it out. We're gonna let it sit again, but then we'll get it out and shape it and then let it rest before we cook it.
So about how many times do you, I know you probably do it by feel, but about how many times are you gonna do this stretch and pull? Like
2 or 3, oh, around the bowl?
Yeah.
I usually try to get 1 on each side. So maybe 4, rotate it.
You've done about 10 so far.
I've done about 10. But you could see it's getting some nice structure to it. You see it's not sticking to the bowl as much.
It's not sticking to your hands as much
It's
either.
not sticking to my hands as much.
All right.
All right.
So that's it. Now just 45 more minutes.
Yep, and then we'll shape it and we'll get ready to cook it.
All right.
We're on the home stretch, so we've done a few stretch and folds over the 45-minute periods. We're now going to take our dough out. We're going to shape it. We have some tools and some things that help with the process. We have a cutting board that we floured, and this flour isn't so much that it's going to incorporate into our dough. It's mostly just to help it move and slide around and not stick. Once we're shaped, we have some tools to help us. We have dough scrapers if we need them to help us. We have options in shaping. We can do round shapes. These are called bannetons. They're usually like a bamboo or a rattan, and these help shape, and they get these cool little lines that you see if you YouTube cool sourdough loaves. You'll see lots come out with cool designs and lines. I have a couple others that make the cool lines, but they're batards, so they're more like a loaf pan. But you can use a loaf pan, you can use a bowl, you can use your Dutch oven, you can put it on parchment on a cookie sheet. Those will just lay flatter, so if you want a nice round loaf, you just help shape. All right, so let's get at it. It's gonna come out, it's almost like marshmallow. So it's a little wet, but you can see that it does say stuck together. I can't see too well, but it kind of comes out as a whole.
One big glob.
One big glob. I don't like to waste any. I like to get it.
You know, you can use your rubber spatula. He's got this dough cutter that he's using, but you can use a rubber spatula to help scrape it out. Oops, sorry. He's tasting it, but he's not. Now he's gonna have to wash his hands. That's water over there, so.
That's water.
You're not eating this.
I didn't take Serve Safe. My apologies. And then now we're just gonna work.
Okay, so if they don't have those, what are you gonna do?
That's a good question. I'm gonna take a little flour on my hands, and I'm just going to shape it with my hands.
I really want to show you guys how large this has gotten when it's come out, and you can see with his floured hands, it's not really sticking at all. It's just pause for just a second. It's really pretty, and it's not like just me touching it. You don't get anything off. It's so it's come together really nicely. So use your hands or basic idea is you're just shaping this into...
Right now what we're doing, because you could see, it looks kind of airy because it is airy inside. We don't want to
There was
push.
a good bubble. There's a bubble right there.
We don't
Can you
wanna-
leave those bubbles in?
You can, and you kind of want to. You don't want to pop them, and you don't want to deflate the dough. So that's where the feel comes in.
You just have to be really gentle.
You have to be really gentle. And what I'm trying to do is just create, it's almost done proofing because our weather is a little different today. So I'm just trying to create a nice little case. And you don't have to get it perfectly round. What you want to get is whatever you're going to shape it into.
Remember Alton Brown said you make it look like a jellyfish. You pull all the sides under and it's a jellyfish.
And so what we have is we have a nice case here because we don't want to overproof our dough. If you were Italian and you overproofed your dough, you might have committed one of the biggest sins in the world, you think. But, so now we're at a pretty good spot where I have a little case around it. It's still, you can see, it's kind of gentle and fragile. So I want to be gentle with it. I'm going to transfer it to my Banneton to normally let it rest here for about an hour to kind of go through its final proofing. It's not going to do a lot of rising there, but you want to watch it because if it's hot, it's going to go quick. You don't need as long for it to wait. And then in the process, we'll get our oven ready in our Dutch oven.
But you can put it back straight into that same bowl that you have been using all along. Just be really gentle. Watch this transfer.
And I'm going to put it, so on the bottom, we have the seam. And we're trying to seal it up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it seam side up while it rests so that when I bring it back out, I can just dump it out.
Flip it over.
So
you want to get your bowl as close to you as possible so you don't have as far to go. And again, you just want to be nervous.
I always get nervous at this part because I don't want all.
And usually he doesn't have people watching
I
him.
don't. So there we go. So I have my seam side up. And as this grows, it's almost ready to cook. So I'm not going to leave it resting for a long time because it's pretty ready to go.
But typically you would leave it...
Probably 30 minutes to an hour. If it's cold, a little longer.
So right now it's hot out. I mean, it's, you guys know what the weekend was like on the 16th. It's like 80 out. So it's in January.
So
it's really
I'm not going to
warm.
leave it too long. I'm going to cover it a little bit. And I'm actually going to get my Dutch oven and heat up my oven right now because it's probably only going to be about 10 or 15 minutes and this is going to be ready to pop in the oven.
But usually you want to go at least 30 minutes.
Yeah, probably if it's cooler out, you'll probably go at least 30 minutes.
All right.
All right, we're on the home stretch. We talked about the Bannetons earlier. This is just one would look like for a normal loaf, or they call them a batard. And you can use the cloth inside and let your dough rest in there or use it as a cover. You can cook it and have it rest on various items, like if you're making long baguettes. We got loaf pans. We have this cloche. Don't tell Mrs. Mastro. I like to get the tools and the toys that come with some of these hobbies, but this is a cloche. Again, if you watch some videos or you look at professional bakers, this is the old cloche, and what's nice is it's a heavier cloth.
It's kind of like a, almost like canvas is what it feels like.
And so you can use this to have your bread rest, as you can shape it, make the pleats, put your loaves, shape the next one next to it, and it holds its shape, and you can put your boulets, you can put your boutards, and it can rest on this covered until it's ready to go in the oven.
He uses these for when he makes like
Ciabattas.
rolls and ciabatta rolls, so there's a big space. So another thing that while we were waiting, we realized is instead of putting your resting bread into, well, if you don't have this, back into that bowl, you can actually put it straight into the whatever you're gonna use to cook it in. So, all right, go ahead.
So I'm just doing this part now to transfer because I'm gonna cook it on the parchment in my Dutch oven. My Dutch oven is preheating with the oven. It's not necessary, it just gets hot, the hotter. There's not much to do here other than get it in.
So for you guys, you could take a cookie sheet, if you don't have this pizza peel, you could take a cookie sheet and lay a piece of parchment on it, and then dump it upside down like he just did.
So we had it, yep.
So that it comes out that way. Or if you go ahead and you have it rise, do this final rise in whatever that baking dish you're gonna use, whether it's a covered baking dish, or if you can bake it straight like this too, but just like your quick bread, it won't get as high.
So you see the lines around it, just a fun design. You could actually Google or YouTube a lot of sourdough designs right now, and some people are making some pretty cool artwork. We're gonna score it. It's called scoring. This tool is a lame, and originally the design is it will create some flaps for some gases to escape. Our crust is gonna hold a lot in, but the interesting piece is that it was a baker's signature. So depending on the design that was scored into the bread would signify which bakery it came from, which city, which town, which province. So we're gonna give it just a...
And again, you don't necessarily have a lame or a
lame. You could use a sharp knife. You could use, if you just have a razor blade, anything that'll just score it.
Give it some lines in there. So now he's taking his and putting it in his pot. But again, remember, you guys can already have it rising in there. Once again, just like the quick bread, it's better if you have a lid on it. So if you have a casserole dish, yeah, we hear you. Or even if you have an oven-safe pot, you can put a cookie sheet or something on top.
Yep, you can put a cookie sheet upside down. Lots of different ways to cook it. We're gonna do it with the lid on for about 30 minutes. That'll hold as the water evaporates. It creates some steam inside the cast iron Dutch oven, and then we're gonna cook it for 30 minutes like that, then take the lid off and we'll check it and give it about another 10 or 15 minutes.
What is it called when what's happening to the dough when
if you have an open container, you can watch it when it does that initial expand. That's called oven spring. So hopefully we have a dough ball that's going to do some oven spring. Since it's in a container, it's not, you saw it start to spread out flat, but since we're back in the container, that's going to hold it, and hopefully it'll get that oven spring, so it'll puff up a little bit, and then we're ready to go.
30 minutes?
30 minutes.
On the timer.
Alexa, 30-minute timer, please. Woo! We got some good oven spring. Look at that, our little design. Got a little bit of a flap going, which is pretty cool. We're gonna let it cook for about 15 minutes.
Ooh.
With the lid off.
Is it undercooked?
Yeah, well, it's undercooked right now, yeah.
But you can see it rose up a little more. It poofed up. It's got a nice case around it.
Isn't that beautiful? It smells so good in my house too. All right, so timer back on for...
Alexa, timer for 15 minutes, please. All right, let's check it out.
15 more minutes.
So after 15 more minutes, it's looking pretty good. One way we can always check this is by temperature. If your loaf is done, should be about 200 degrees.
Alton Brown suggests you test on the bottom. Look at that.
So
It's gonna keep going. And then we have carryover cooking. It's gonna reach 100.
So we
or
definitely
200.
don't want to cut it right away. We're going to take it out. We're going to let it rest and cool down for a bit, and then we'll cut into it and eat it later.
Actually, we're not gonna.
We won't.
We're not gonna cut into this one. We're giving this one as a gift. So you have to trust that it looks nice inside of it. All right, you're gonna take it out of this right now and put it somewhere to rest and cool, or are you gonna just leave it like that to cool?
I'm going to take it out and put it on here.
He's not. We're gonna let it cool in that. All right, there's your finished sourdough loaf. It's beautiful.